Okay, good evening, everyone. Today we have a hands-on experience on association rule. Again, please, if you use Zoom, please mute yours. Okay. Okay, so we have a hands-on experience on association rule. Basically, our data set contains on so many transactions in a store. We want to find some association rules, some significant ones. Then maybe you can redesign your store. The store could be either online or simple neighborhood stores such as Walmart. So having said that, for today, please go to your Moodle week 8 and download the association rule workflow. If it's your first time working with that workflow, which contains some modules related to association rule, you need to update your Knime. So I put a PDF file. So you might see such a picture if it's, especially if you have, if you are a Microsoft user, it asks you to do some updates and importing some modules. Just play next, and the module name is item set mining. It allows you to use some extra nodes that for association rule. I'll give you like 5 minutes to do that. So if you're a Mac user and you have something equivalent to file, go to let's say install Knime extensions, and here just search for item set mining. Oh, it doesn't show. Okay, it's weird. So okay, so if you're Mac user, go to File, install Knime extensions. So in Mac is a little different. And here search for item set mining. And just install this extension. But if you're a Windows user, when you open the workflow, it automatically brings the installation, so it's much easier. Okay, we almost more than half of the semester. Still, some we don't mute when they use Knime, when they use Zoom. So if next class you forget to mute, I tell your names in the class. Today, I think 3 of you didn't mute, so. Yes. So if you forget, when you open the PDF file that I put on your Moodle, you see the name of extension that you need to install. Item set mining. Okay, let me wait a little more. So you all of you should download the workflow and have the item set package mining, item set mining package installed on your Knime. Okay, so is there anyone remember what was the benefits of using association? Why we do association rule mining? Does anyone remember? So I think you just have like 4 days as your fall break. You shouldn't forget. People over Zoom, do you guys remember what was the goal of association rule mining? Yes?
It's a helper to determine the customer behavior.
Yeah, so which items goes together? Yeah, so let me remind you, otherwise today's session might be a little ambiguous for you, what I'm doing tonight. So, okay, so do you guys remember we had a beer and diapers examples? So beer and diaper goes together. So anyone remember what? Okay, could you say what was the beer diaper example?
So, followers who went to buy diapers ended up hearing because both of these items were kept next to each other.
Yeah, so married men, they might have kids, so they don't have time, or maybe it's not that much ethical if you have some children, you spend night over bar. So if they want to drink, so they just go buy some beers, and because of the kids, they buy probably some diapers. On top of that, when you go to Walmart or Whole Foods, whenever you want to buy coffee, you might see some tea or coffee filters next to the coffee. So those companies know people who may buy coffee, they might also interested to buy a coffee filter. So they want you guys to spend as much as you need or as much as possible, so they make more money. Otherwise, you might buy coffee and you get near your house, and you might remember, oh, you forgot to buy a coffee filter. So you might buy it from another store. So, and I think many times you, especially for Walmart, so you might think you need to buy 4 or 5 items, but you end up buying like 20 items because they know the association rule and they put some items next to each other. So you might encourage to buy more than what you expect. Okay, so does anyone remember what based on the formulation that we have? So if we had basically a threshold for significant association or basically significance of 2 items goes together. So is there anyone remember that threshold number? Yes. So if lift is more than 1, based on the formula, we end up saying that there is a significant association between 2 items. Not necessarily 2 items, it might be an association between like 4 items. Let's say coffee, tea, and coffee filter could be an antecedent of sugar. So 3 items could be antecedent 1 item, or 3 items, 2 items. So it's not necessarily 1 item antecedent of another consequence. Okay, so, and you might remember we had an example. So the calculation is pretty hard. So you guys could guess how many items could be in the regular Walmart store? Yeah, so it takes forever if you calculate the association between items. And the amount of your calculation is not just for 1,000 items, could be like, even if there's just 1,000 items, you might end up doing 12,000 calculations, because it's not just 1 by 1. It could be 2 items antecedent of 3 items. So the combination is even much more than 1,000. So we don't want to do it by hand. If you in your final exam, I might ask you to calculate by hand. So please just review the lecture. So be prepared to answer by hand. If it's just 1 or 2 items, but when there are thousands of items, doesn't make sense to find association using like calculators. Okay, so today's goal, we want to do association rule experiment, and for thousands of items from a store. So the input data is thousands of transactions, and we want to find the significant association rule. So you could redesign your store accordingly. Any questions so far? Okay. So hopefully the today workflow makes more sense now. So table reader. So I'm loading a data from Knime website, so Knime workflow/data transaction table. So if you look at the read from, it's custom Knime URL, but it could be from your local file too. But here I'm just getting from custom Knime URL. So also you see I have several rows, row ID and column 0. So column 0 is just a basically items ID of each transaction. So for now, those numbers doesn't make sense for you. Maybe one of them could be coffee, tea, sugar. So instead of having names, we have item ID. So we want to let Knimes know that these spaces are delimiters. It just means when it reads, it just should consider those as independent ID number. So with cell splitter, if I click on it, I'm just saying that look at the column 0 and delimiter is space. So I didn't put anything there. Press OK. If you look at the result, so you don't see actually what is inside the column, but it's just a Knime-friendly format. And comma means now Knime knows there are separate numbers. So it's in the left side under column 0, for Knime seems to be a very long string. But in the right side, column 0 underline split result set, Knime just know there's several numbers in each cell. Yes? So if you click on cell splitter, actually I just leave as default because the delimiter is a space. So there's nothing here. But if it was like, it doesn't need to be comma, it might be something like this, AA. So AA could be a splitter, but it's very weird. Usually the splitter is either a space or comma. So look at the association rule module. You just identify the columns that has your items, and it calculates all other parameters that you have learned in association rule mining. So let me right click and look at the result. So consequent, antecedent. So antecedent comes first, then consequent. So one of them could be coffee filter, and the one just coffee. Then you have different like relative item support. So you might remember we talked about item support, but the more important thing, the most important is rule lift. So let me just click and sort ascending. So some of the rules have lift of less than 1, so they're not significant. So 1 and more than that, significant associations. Pretty easy so far, right? You just have a module, you just have a delimiter or a splitter column. Then Knime knows there is several items, and then just do, okay, find the association. Any questions so far? So let me wait 1 minute for your friend over Zoom in case they have questions. Okay, so look at the result. I don't think it's a useful result because we have several rows just IDs. I'm not sure even what does those number means. So what can you do? I have also another table. I intentionally put as a deprecated one. It just means it is developing previous version of Knime. So you can just replace it, or most likely it just works. So for newer version, usually the previous deprecated modules also works, which works here. The reason I put it here is for your project, you might search and just drag and drop some nodes. In case they look deprecated, no worries. They most likely you can work with them. But let's say you're not happy with this node, you can just here search for table reader. And let me see. So this is the address. I copied. Open the new table reader node. Here I paste the address. And instead of local file system, I look for custom Knime URL. Okay. Now I can delete this one and replace. So again, no worries if you see deprecated nodes. It just means older version. Okay, let's look at the table that I imported. So look, it has the item ID, price, and product name. So what if I use this item ID connected to the antecedent consequent ID number that I already had? So now those names makes more sense for me. Let's look. Okay, let me repeat. So the node was deprecated. Deprecate just means older version. So I wanted to update table reader. So I search for the node name, drag and drop. Now I need to basically change the settings. So I can use the updated node. Double click on table reader. So this is the URL that I brought the data. Control C. So I want to use same settings in the newer version of Node. In table reader, I double click. The only settings I have is either file address, and also I should identify it's a Knime URL. So, it's freeze. So just close and open it again. I can. If it's a hardware issue, I cannot fix it. So what I did, basically, I import a new table. It has item ID, price value, also product name. Huh? So look what. So did you paste this address?
Yeah, I paste the address, same address, but it's just.
So look at here. Look at. Change this one to custom Knime URL.
Oh.
Yeah.
And what else we need to do?
That's it. Just press OK. Okay, so in the next node, I just want to tell Knime. So whatever you see in the item column is ID, is a string. It's not a numerical value. For example, what I mean numerical value. So let me just write again. So my item is 0, 1, 2. These are just ID numbers. So ID number of 2 doesn't mean 2 times more than ID number 1. It's just like they should deal with it as a string. So it's the reason in the next node, I'm using a number to string. Basically, I just convert the item column from a numerical column to a string column. The last but not least step, I have from the new table, I have ID number under item column and product name. I can connect it to the previous table that I did association rule mining. So let me open the previous one. Here I have consequent ID number. I can just connect using these two columns. Consequent IDs are to item IDs. They are same, we just join them together. So if you look at the joiner, I'll just say that consequent and consequent from the first table is equivalent to item column in the next column table. And doing inner join, let me right click and execute again and show you the results. So go to the join result. So now I have consequent IDs as equivalent names. So for example, I know the first item is about milk, fat-free. I have sour cream, yogurt, fried egg. So is there any questions so far? So you got the point. So what I did, I imported some transactions, converted to a Knime-friendly format, then apply association rule mining and find lift between some items. Then I want to, that table makes more sense. So I imported the dictionary, which had the item names and item ID, and I just joined them. So based on what I did so far, now you know what does your consequent ID number means. So you know the name and the price. So still, they may not be that much useful because I don't know what is my antecedents, right? My antecedents are just some ID numbers. In the next part of the workflow, I do similar joining, but this time I also change my antecedent from ID number to actual names. Also, some of the lifts are less than 1 rule lift, so I want to exclude them too. So I work with a more useful table. I give you a few minutes, so in case you need to add some comments or take notes for the first part, do that. Second workflow is similar to the first one, but it's now I add more steps, so to just join more names and make it more meaningful. So you have a few minutes. If you have questions or you want to take notes, you can do it now. Well, let me see if I can help you. Okay, so just open. No. So it is black and it's the triangle.
drag and drop. So the previous one was deprecated, just like older version. You still can use the previous, but you just use the updated version. That's it. That's it. No, boy, so you didn't use Zoom, you only so you didn't use Slack. If it's hardware issue, usually I cannot, I don't know. But if it's software, I can get. Is there another question from my friend? No. There you go. So no worries, anytime you have questions, just ask.
Professor,
Yeah.
why don't you change the number value to string value?
It's just for Knime to be able to connect them together. That's it. Yeah, it's just recognize it's not name, it's a ID, it's a string. I mean, here you don't have to actually, but for in case you need for your project, I just sometimes add extra notes. So, but here is a redundant. You don't have to do that.
It's like all projects may call some real items. Is that right?
Yeah, you in your project maybe you need to know there is a convert your type from number to string. So let's say in your project maybe you need to convert from a string to number. So you maybe drag and drop another column. Yeah, so one of your friends asks about rule lift. So I actually taught in the previous session, but basically in association rule mining, whenever a relationship between two items or two groups of items has lift of more than one, it means there's a significant relationship. For example, we expect a lift between diapers and beer should be more than one. Okay, so let's look at the second workflow. It's pretty much similar to first one. I just like have extra steps to assign names to antecedents. So just clicking the first part. I think first part is pretty straightforward. I have exactly similar to previous workflow. I import transaction data and another one dictionary, just as the ID, price, and names. And in the upper branch, I let Knime knows that basically space means delimiter. Also, I convert the ID from number to string. Okay, so far I think it's pretty much similar to what I did before. So look at the remaining. So first, I do the association rule mining. And if you look at the results, pretty much similar before, I have consequent ID and antecedent IDs. And some of the like parameters like the rule, lift, confidence, support. So if you forgot what do they mean, just please look at the previous session. But for us, lift is the most important parameter that we want to look at. Because basically lift is built over the previous parameters. and is the final parameter that we want to consider for basically finding the significance of association rules. Okay, new things happens in the next meta node. If you click on it, so you see I have two joiner here, one in the upper row and lower row. So one joiner is for antecedent and the other for consequences. So in the first node, I just make a new column of row ID. I name it as rule ID. So I just have identification number or value. So later, when I want to just group them back, I group them based on this ID number that I just created. So first step, I ungroup my data based on antecedent. So let me just open it here. So for some of the rules, I have several antecedents. I just want to open them up. After I open them up, in each row, I just have one ID instead of several IDs. Then I connect my dictionary table based on the ungrouped new table. So let's look at ungrouped node and the result. So look, I used to have antecedent column, but I ungrouped them. So I have a new antecedent column. And look at them. So instead of row 8, I have row 8 underline 1, underline 2, and underline 3. So row 8 multiplied by 3. Because for the consequent of 1, 4, 6, I have 3 antecedents. So still everything is repeated, but in the antecedent #1, I have 117, 235, and 12. So I just wait 1 or 2 minutes here. So just open the table and just look at it. Okay, next step, similar to previous workflow that I show you. For each antecedent, I assign a name. That's it. So I have joiner 1. So if you double click on joiner node, you see I'm saying that antecedent #1 means the antecedent column that I just open it up. So I ungrouped. And also I have item column from my dictionary, and just saying just join them based on similarity of the values in these two columns. Right click. Look at the results. Okay, so for again, row 8-1, -2, and -3. So I have I don't know what is the item actually, but the antecedent is, if I don't make any mistake, tuna, lobster, and shrimp. So I know their prices and also the item ID. So you see 117, 235, 12. 117, 235, 12 in the bracket. So again, 117, 235, 12, 117, 235, 12. I wait a little bit so you just discover the table. Just explore by yourself and just look at the different product names, the item IDs, and also I have antecedent #1. I just spend like a few minutes in case I don't want you have some ambiguity. So is it the straightforward, right? That makes sense what I did here. If it doesn't make sense, I'm just ask questions so I can explain. So basically, the only goal I had, so for antecedent column, I have several items in bracket I don't like because it's not useful. I want to change those numbers to names. So I ungroup each bracket. So let's say, for example, row 8 had three items in the bracket. So when I ungroup it, it converts from 1 row to 3 rows. Then I joined to my data dictionary, and I found what was each of items within that bracket. So first I ungrouped. Again, I can group them back, right? So when I group them back, also I do some manual aggregations. For example, for price, I want to sum of the prices. So also for product name, I just want concatenate. So what does it mean? So I had 3 rows of the names, tuna, lobster, and shrimp. I just want them to be next to each other in one bracket. So concatenate means that. Also I have like some first value, mean value, those kind of things. It's not necessary, so I don't have to find them. But instead of, for example, for price, maybe you can look at the mean too, but I think sum makes more sense. Or instead of finding the first value, maybe you can find the mean value or median, those kind of things. So right click, look at the group table. So look, now I have basically those antecedent items all in one. So for example, instead of having 2 numbers, I know that antecedent of 187 has 2 basic consequent of quail and eggs. Quail eggs, maybe it's just one. Let's say tuna and shrimp is like 117 and 12. It's just equivalent of these 2. Okay, so I think, okay, so antecedent of tuna and shrimp have a consequent of 146. Orange juice has consequent of 70. And similar to others like tuna, lobster, and shrimp they are antecedent for a consequent with the code of 7T. So what could be the next step in your mind? So I ungrouped, join the names, group them back, right? So, and I know what are my antecedents. Still the column names is back. So one step is just changing the column name to something makes more sense. Instead of concatenate parentheses product name, maybe I can just rename it to antecedent items or something like that. So what could be other steps in your mind? Look at consequent, still on ID numbers, right? 192, 168, 146, right? So maybe I can do another join and also find what does those ID numbers means. Which I did in next step. So first I just renamed some columns. For example, instead of having the concatenate parentheses, maybe I can have antecedent names instead of like mean whatever. I can have antecedent total price. So basically here I just renamed some of my columns so they could make more sense for me. So if you right click execute. So yeah, instead of concatenate whatever, so I have antecedent names, their prices. Maybe I could rename the last column too, but I just left as it is. Okay, so next is another joiner. Here you have a deprecated version. I already told you how to use the updated version. So in this one, I want to let Knime knows the consequent is exactly the item. The consequent ID is exactly item IDs. Just join them together. So now I can find, instead of having the consequent ID, I can have consequent names. Execute. So I have antecedent names, right? Also, and then I have product name, but I know product name comes from my data dictionary. It actually means my consequent name. So I can rename it later. So, but I think now is more useful. So tuna and shrimp are antecedent of yogurt. I'm not sure it makes sense, but it happened in that specific store. So people who bought tuna and shrimp, they already bought yogurt and apple juice. But I think the next one makes more sense. So people who bought ketchup maybe bought octopus. So some of them are not that much makes sense for me, but end up having, let's look at the rule ID. Where's the lift? Yeah, it seems significant. And let me just open it up. Yeah, the leaf is even more than one. Yeah, some of them doesn't make sense. Yeah. I don't know, like, how could you make a story? Like for beer and diapers, somebody did a story, but I'm not sure for ketchup and octopus. So one of your friends just asked me, how did I get this workflow? Basically, usually I get some workflows from the Knime website. So they have some teaching materials, but usually I just modify them. Also, I do my own research. For example, what if I want to do this? So I just Google it and find it. But actually, since I'm instructor, Knime sends me some workflows. But usually, I don't just use their workflow. I do some basically a lot of modification. And same if you for your own project, you may do something similar. So you search for some workflow, or I already give you so many workflows. You use them, but you need to modify based for your own need, for your own project. Yeah, but since I'm instructor, I am privileged of using they send me so many of workflows. But I am pretty sure you can find my work something similar to my workflow if you just Google it. So, but I think the concept of group and ungroup should make sense, because let me just open it here. So I have so many items in one bracket in one cell. And if you remember SQL, the way that you join is, I'm not sure if you can join directly. I'm pretty sure in SQL, you know that when, you need to join based on similar values in the cells. So one of your cells is a data dictionary, which for each ID you have one name. Another one, your ID is on bracket. So you need to ungroup to be able to join it later. So some of the logics make sense, but it might be scary, but no worries. I mean, just first time we are working with Knime and see group ungroup, so it might look very scary. So after a while, you would end up knowing or guessing what could you do. You can just Google it or look at the documentation and find the other approaches that people use. Okay, with column rename, I want to make my columns to be more intuitive. So now I know what is my consequent, antecedent, and also the rule lift. Some of them is very hard to find or make a story why some of them could be relevant. So beef and octopus could make a story. Somebody might buy different types of meat together, so you can put those meats next to each other. Some that could be a little more challenging. Okay, so with the column filter, I just exclude so many irrelevant columns. Just Knime did some calculations, like basically leave, confidence, support, but they may not be that much needed for my own work. So let me close and go back and run here. So if you right click on the results, you might see it just summarizes what I needed. Antecedent, consequence, and lift. Click on mean rule lift and sort ascending. So some of them are basically have a lift of less than 1. So it means non-significant association. So you might ask, okay, how could we get rid of it? So to row filter. So let me just Google how to filter out some rows in Knime. So the first thing is a row filter. So look at what happens. So it provides some documentation, some explanations. So but look at here, some of them you can drag and drop. Look, I just drag and drop from the website. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, but here I was lucky. So when I just Google how to filter out, I had some typo. How to filter out some rows in Knime. First link was row filter. I went there and just drag and drop. I think it was the other link. It was this link. Yeah. Then I just drag and drop node, and I just select, drag, drop in Knime. So again, based on your project, you don't have to know all of the nodes. I think it takes like maybe more than 2 years. You just know all of the nodes. More efficiently, you can just Google what you need, what you are looking for, and Knime has a good documentation. So like how to ungroup based on cell 9. So I didn't know how to ungroup. I just Google it. The first thing is about ungroup node. I read it. If it makes sense for me, sounds useful, I just select here, drag, drop. I think it's much more efficient if you just Google what you need for and just read the documentations. Usually there is a good documentations for Knime. So again, right click on row. Okay, let me show you the row filter. I'm just saying, just include everything that has a lower bound of 1. So I'm looking at mean of the rule lift. And I want to just have the rows that they have the lift of more than 1. Execute, right click, filters. So now I just have the significant lifts. And more interestingly, it's not forever. Every seasons or after some windows of time, you need to update your lift table. So here you can make a story for some of them, but for some of the lifts, it's very hard to make a story. Even for me, first time I heard of diapers and beer, making a story was really difficult. Maybe in some part of the US and in some seasons, some of the lifts could make sense, but just speaking, for me, it's very hard to make some story for those association rules. Okay, let me just go back to the big picture from this table. So first of all, I have so many transactions. I just change it to Knime friendly and use the association rule node to find them. So my antecedent and consequences were in bracket, and also in the some brackets, you might have more than one item. I search how to ungroup. I ungroup them, join to my dictionary, group them back. Then maybe I need to rename some of the columns and I exclude them. At the end, I end up using just the columns that I need. Instead of having IDs in bracket, I have names in it. And also I filter out the lift values that are less than 1. Any questions? Actually, I expected you have more questions. I mean, either it's super easy or too difficult. So there's not that many questions. So otherwise, I could provide more materials for tonight. So what is your feedback? Does it look so scary and difficult? Yes? Oh my God. Again, it's first time you work with this, and I know I put a lot of information tonight. Let's see. A little tricky. Yeah, I think it's good to just go back and just do a step by. I try to pause, give you some minutes to look at it, but I know I provided some. Still, it's just one workflow, but even for myself, it took 2 hours for me to modify it. So, and I want to teach in one hour and 15 minutes. So might look a little scary. So let's tricky. But you got the big picture. So the big picture was finding association rule and just assigning, changing IDs to names, and just working with the list values that makes more sense. Okay, I'm glad some of you know. What about the big picture? Does it make sense? What was the goal of?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, I mean the big picture, what I did tonight. Okay, cool. Okay, so I don't give you any more assignment. So, but your assignment, I have an optional assignment. Just open up the workflow and just look at the different sections and just play with those settings and go through that. So just do a little of practice. And but I expect most of your projects are not association. I'm not sure even. I think there's no group work in association rule, but it's still for the remaining of your semester. For the next deliveries, you can change the topics. If you want to do association rule for your final project, that's totally fine. But I'm most likely it's not the most of you don't pick it for your final project. Okay, one of your friends asked about assignment 7, so let me just look at it. Assignment 7. Assignment 7 is the individual one. Yeah, definitely do it individually. Okay, for the final exam, I ask you some of the questions that, first of all, is a take home. I give you like a couple of days to work in your final exam. Basically, I haven't decided yet, but most likely you need to solve some questions and some calculations. It's not, I don't ask you to what section of, or just define something, because when it's take home, it just means is open book, and I don't want you guys just try to find your work. So you do some calculations, and I give you last 3 semesters or at least 2 semesters of sample questions. So you can look at what was in the last 2 or 3 semesters before. So you end up having a good feeling of what is your final exam. Usually people end up really good grades, no worries, but still you have the questions and answers for the last 2 or 3 semesters. So should be very straightforward. And okay, so for your final exam, you can also help each other to solve it, and just maybe you can make some study groups and study the previous semesters, and hopefully should be very straightforward for you guys. Yes?
When we're submitting project in level 2, do we have to continue on the first?
If you haven't changed your topic, for some of you, I put some comments. So if you think if my comment is good, okay, and you feel comfortable, you can just keep working on it. But if you still can change your topic,
Okay.
if you want.
No, so when we submit the file number 2, do we have to submit it in continuation to file number 1 or as a separate file?
Both are fine.
Okay.
Oh.
Assignment 7, you said it's an individual.
Yes.
But since we work, like both of us are in the same group.
Yeah, I want each of you at least understand what is going on. What is the plan? And that's an easy assignment. I mean, I think even I said you can.
But it's not necessarily.
Even I said draw on piece of a paper, so that should be very easy for everyone.
My concern is
Just separate. Yeah. I just want to be sure. each people in the group knows what is going on, what is the plan. So, and if they want to do it individually, are they still able to do that or not? Yes, if you didn't end up in the second round, please submit your, please catch it up. I gave you some extensions. Also, you should submit all of your assignments. Is there any other questions? Okay, let's see. Deadline. Nobody told me, maybe no one, I'm not sure. So let's see if, I'm not sure how many, but maybe 0, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many end up run 2, but that's okay. It was just an exercise. So yeah, okay, if there's no question, that's for tonight. Still, if you have questions, you can reach me through Telegram or just email me, and I would be more than happy to see you in my office hours too. Okay, thank you very much and have a great evening.